This is the Night Shift Podcast, powered by Black and Gold Banneret, your home for news and analysis from all UCF night sports. The Night Shift starts now.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into this edition of Night Shift. Of course, I am Kyle Nash, the student of the game. Here with me, the very esteemed Sultan of Sickball himself, Eric Lopez. And of course, everybody's famous, the always formidable Bryson Turner. Gentlemen, welcome in. Just days away, by the way, from, I guess we would call it Coaches Media Day for football here upcoming. So, by the way, make sure you check out that action. There'll be plenty of it, both on the blackandgoldbanneret.com as well as Night Shift. So there's all of that going on. But before we get into all of that, there was one bit of juicy morsel we wanted to talk about. And of course, that is ELO and Bryson Turner putting together a very meaty topic, the top 50 coaches of UCF history. And I think, by the way, I got to leave with this banger. Apparently people out there weren't aware that we had 50 head coaches all time.
No, that's amazing.
Yes, apparently it started in the 70s.
Or maybe sooner, I guess, 2000. We all, what? Yes. A, we've had more than 50 head coaches in the history of UCF athletics. And B, yes, there are other head coaches beyond just football. How about that? And basketball. Amazing.
Absolutely right. And Bryson, I think you were the one that got that question. I'm just going to ask out of curiosity, was it laughter, your first reaction when you were asked that question?
A little bit. I can understand if you don't follow the other sports that closely. You don't have that 50 number in mind when you think of every head coach that UCF has ever had. But when you take into account every single sport that UCF has provided, it does not surprise me that there have been over 50 head coaches. In fact, it's probably closer to double that.
At the very least, I would dare say, to Lopez's point, I mean, this was something that spanned another century at some point here that we're talking about, right? So with all the above in mind, let's get right into it. Of course, there was a lot of deliberation between you and ELO in putting this list together. And Eric, I'll start with you. In your mind, what was kind of the criteria you had as you were kind of sifting through the list here to find your top 50, your half centennial of candidates here?
Well, this is our third annual that we've done this. We did this in 2020 where we did a top 40, and then we did a top 30 in 2023 because we had so much content that year because that was leading into the first year of the Big 12 that hey, let's just shrink it to fit it in because obviously we got Big 12 year one as a big story to cover and all that. So this year we decided to expand it to 50. In part, credit to Bryson, he found a lot of research on a lot of coaches that UCF fans don't probably know about. And that, what are the goals of this top 50? I know we're going to focus on the ranking itself and where the coaches are ranked and all that. And I get all that. That's what makes this fun. It's subjective. I get all that. But one of the other side goals of this is to educate kind of the history of UCF athletics in various sports, because I think people would be surprised at what sports have been successful and longer than people might think. It may be some sports that are not as successful as you think, and some coaches that have been a big part of that, who started programs, who's been successful and things like that. So that's part of it. It's criteria success, obviously, the impact that they've had on those respective programs, among others, right, Bryson? I'll let you kind of lead the way on that from a standpoint as we kind of narrowed this list down.
Yes, it's a measure of impact, success, and also we want to make sure we make clear that this is head coaching tenures only.
Right.
So if someone on the list had been an assistant coach at any point in time, Mike Kruzak and Becky Kramer being the two that come off the top of my mind, their assistant coaching tenures do not count. Eric and I have a separate list for those things, which we did not update this time around, but we did do one back in 2023. So if you want to see that, then go over and check that article out on the blackandgoldbanneret.com.
Yeah, you mentioned that too. If it wasn't for, if we left assistants in, we might have more than one Gooch on this list. I dare say, shouts to Alan Gooch, who's the director of the Cure Bowl as well here locally in Orlando, for those that didn't know. But
Interim head coaches don't count either, by the way.
Right, that's a great point you make there too as well, Bryson Turner. You beat me to it. Well done. With all of that being said, let me start with this right out the gate. And Bryson, I'm going to start with you. Eric, follow up. What was kind of the toughest decision, not necessarily whether to get them into the top 50, but as to where to place them? Which coach did you really have a hard time finding the right landing spot for on this list?
I think the hardest one to figure out were the current active head coaches, because they do deserve to be considered for this list. Some of them, of course, have been around for a long time, but of course, Eric and I, having done this list in 2023, what have their accomplishments that they have done since the last list determine where they should be in terms of their ranking? Do we move them down because they've let us down lately? Do we keep them where they are because they still had a lot of good years that kept them up in the first place? I would argue is probably the hardest bit in all of this. And a lot of that kind of came down to that, I would say 15 through 26, roughly. That's where a lot of active head coaches ended up right around that region. Mm-hmm. And so that region, I think, was fairly hard to rank because we wanted to make sure that we ordered them correctly, and with how dynamic that all those coaches are with what they've done, we want to make sure we got that right.
And Elo, in your case, is there any particular name that shouts out for where you had a little trouble placing them in the right part of the top 50?
Well, it's very unique. This is the challenge. Part of the challenge when you make a list like this is you're comparing coaches from different sports, right? So how do you value a coach that coached, for example, golf versus basketball and baseball? And so you almost that's part of the challenge. I agree with Bryson. I would say, that around that 14, 15 spot to about 25 was really tough. I mean, I'll be honest, that's where me and Bryson probably had the most back and forth chatter. And I'm not even sure if we came to necessarily a full agreement, more so than a compromise type of thing to be honest, because in all seriousness, as you guys look at the rankings, a lot of this is very narrow margin. Like, we're not like a couple of things. The other thing, at least on my standpoint, is you got to get emotions out of it. Mm-hmm. And I'll give you the guy's name and his example, and that's Gus Malzahn, who I guess right now is enemy number 101 at UCF land. I've been fascinated by the feedback of, we ranked them 41st, which is a significant drop from where we ranked them 2023. Going into the first year of the Big 12, we had them, I want to say, was high 20s, 25. We had them 25. It was coming off that 9-win year in the American. There was optimism there in the Big 12 going into year one of the Big 12. And obviously the last two seasons did not go well, especially last year. But now it's the negativity is just over the top. Like, that was interesting, some of the reaction. Getting people like, he shouldn't even be on the top 50. And I'm thinking to myself, do you really, settle down and take the body of work. Yeah, I didn't end well and you're not happy about it, but the guy did accomplish some things to the point now, Kyle, where I think it's gone the completely unfair the other way now. Where now it's everybody's acting like he went winless in his entire career. That is not the case. He won 9 games in his first year, beat Florida.
I was about to say, everybody's forgotten the Gus Perillo already.
Correct. Year 2, won 9 games, was a win away from playing in a New Year's Six bowl. And then even year 3 at the Big 12, I know 6 and 7, you're a couple plays here away from having a winning season in year 1 of the Big 12. I get last year was terrible, went south. I'm not going to excuse that, but that doesn't mean he's not warranted. He's had a significant impact in helping in transitioning UCF football from the American to the Big 12. Like, it's interesting. There are people that are upset because they think, for example, we ranked him ahead of Mike Kruzek. Mike Kruzek, of course, the head coach at UCF. Now, I think part of this, everybody likes Mike Kruzek. He's a UCF lifer. To Bryson, he was an assistant coach under Gene McDowell and then was promoted to head coach in 1998. I think some of this, people that are saying Kruzek should be ahead of Gus, is a result of how things ended with Gus, number one. Number two, they like Mike. But then number three, they're assuming that we're including the assistant coaching years where he was 12 years as the offensive coordinator. That is not included, to Bryson's point earlier. We're not including that when we rank Mike Kruzek. We're just judging it on his head coaching era at time, because I think we ranked him top 5 assistant all time. But as a head coach, fourth, we ranked him fourth. See, Bryson's like our Karnacki. He knows all the facts and stats.
Right? Hey, listen, by the way, this is why he's such a great addition over there on Nights on UCF, where he'll be doing some of his coverage there. I guess that means we're competing. We're fat and breast.
Yes. This is the first time I mentioned that. Yeah, I'll be over at UCF Nights on SI covering football and men's basketball. I'll still be over here on the Night Shift podcast, as well as covering every other UCF sport for the Black and Gold Banneret. So don't worry. You'll still see me around here. But yeah, for football and men's basketball, I'll be working with UCF Nights on SI.
And I think the significant element that that needs to be mentioned, since you brought it up, Bryson, is Malzahn dealing with a change in era, that shattering an ever-changing football landscape that Kruzek did not have to deal with. I dare say his biggest issue was trying to get Dante to stay one more year before jumping to the NFL.
Yeah. By the way, okay. Like, I'm sorry, but I don't even think it's close. Like we were Gus 41. I think we had Mike at 48. You take away Dante Culpepper, okay? He took over the team. It was Dante Culpepper's senior year. I went to a couple of those games, 9-2. After that, it's mediocrity. Mm-hmm. Like, underachieved. 7-5 went 7-5, I believe, in 02, and 6-5 in 01. In year one of the MAC, where they were supposedly going to dominate the MAC, it went down south in 03. In fact, worse. In 03, I would argue the program actually was in worse shape than even how Gus left it. So I just don't again, that's just emotional tie. Oh, because you're mad at how things ended last year. Maybe you're mad because he went now to be the OC at FSU. I'm not saying that there wasn't disappointments. That's why we dropped him in the rankings
16
all the way down to
exact. Yeah.
Significant. But to say he had no contributions is insane. And to think that Mike Kruzek was I covered Mike Kruzek. I liked Mike Kruzek, but Gus is a way better coach. And by the way, Gus in a much tougher era and competition than Mike Kruzek dealt with.
Agree. Yeah, Mike Kruzek, not a power conference coach. That's a great point, Eric Lopez. Go ahead, Bryson.
Yeah, to Eric's point, Mike Kruzek and Gus Malzahn, when you look on paper, are actually fairly similar in terms of their tenures, where they both left with records just above 500. They both captured a signature win in UCF history, Kruzek in 2000 with the Alabama game, and then Gus Malzahn with the Gus Barilla Bowl in 2021. And both of their head coaching tenures didn't exactly end very poorly. The biggest difference in why I would rank Gus Malzahn ahead of Kruzek just in terms of football coaches is that Gus Malzahn did what he did in a much tougher college football environment and level than what Mike Kruzek was doing, because this was the independent/MAC era for Mike Kruzek, and while Gus Malzahn did this in the last year of the American and then into the Big 12.
And I find some of the losses, Kruzek, like using the Utah State, like using the teams in the MAC, come on, what are we doing?
We're mentioning active coaches. I mean, obviously, I would wonder what I'll put it this way. I'm curious to see in 2 more years where we have one Scott Frost, who is pretty high on the list now. I won't tell you where. You'll need to check it out on the blackandgoldbanneret.com. But sure then
what's funny about that is obviously that has gotten a lot of reactions over the past. What's interesting, I'm curious about. Okay?
From me in particular. I won't front.
You in particular. But here's what I'm going to be interested in it, because we're going to unveil the top 10 on Monday on the site, blackandgoldbanneret.com. We'll probably have a reaction to it afterwards, right? I remember when the list came out, there was kind of negative Frost, right? 2020, for example. It was like, he's in Nebraska, boo, boo, boo. I'll be curious to see what the reaction will be about him and the rankings, if it's changed kind of like the Gus thing went negative. I wonder if the Scott thing now is more optimistic. Anyway, but that's an interesting storyline to follow.
And also worthwhile how Dawkins concludes his UCF career in the Big 12, I think might move him up. These are just some examples and why it's difficult to insert active coaches into a list like this. I think you're both very brave to even try it. I mean, granted, Frost is different. It's not like you take him out just because he came back. That's a little weird, but yeah. So I'll give it this. You two definitely mention a very unique challenge there. Let me go with this. Is there any coach, and Bryson, I'll go to you on this first if you have somebody, because if either of you two do, I think it would be you here in this instance. Is there a coach who you feel like got squeezed out of the top 50 that you owe an apology to here for being just short of the cut? Kind of like apparently all of us need to apologize for JJ Horton, as I hinted on our quarter century team for football a few weeks back. Check that out, Night Shift podcast. But what do you think, Bryson?
Well, I'll say that I probably would need to make an apology for anybody that coached UCF track and field like pre-1990 something, because the way that the record keeping works and the way that I had to do my research for this, I could not find anything concrete about that era that I was not comfortable with. So, and I did look at some stuff. We actually did some pretty cool things in men's and women's track back then. So, but I just couldn't find anything concrete enough to look on that. So apologies to anybody that ran track for UCF back then. I just couldn't find enough about your coach to feel good about putting him or her on this list. The good news is that with it being top 50, we got a lot of people that we wanted to get in. The people that we left out was mostly just a matter of I couldn't find out if any research on them, or I had no idea who they are, or they didn't do well.
But hey, the good news is we can assure that they actually exist, right, Bryson? Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody notable. I mean, I know somebody brought up Bill Barker possibility there. Somebody, our good friend Kevin from the podcast brought it up. I don't know if that...
He's definitely an assistant, I would say. I've spoken with Bill Barker before. You can see our interview on the Black and Gold Banner or the Night Shift YouTube channel. And he's an absolutely wonderful, wonderful coach. It's just, again, kind of like Mike Kruzek, his head coaching tenure just didn't really go all that well. And so
it's very short and not well. Yeah.
Yeah. And so his contributions are better recognized as a part of the assistant coach, as part of the assistant coach's ranking. That's where he would be a better fit. We ranked him number 7 in the last assistant coach's ranking, Eric Lopez.
Yeah, so I don't think there's anybody, big omission. I think the harder part was the rankings, right? There's people having gripes, like as we're recording this, some people upset because we have Todd Dagenet, for example, the volleyball coach, at 21. And again, as I emphasized earlier, that 25 to 15 range is very tricky. It's very tight. But for example, Johnny Dawkins, we have ranked in the top 15. The guy, you realize that UCF basketball has been to 5 postseasons over the last 8 years. No time in no era in UCF basketball have they ever gone to postseason that many times in an 8-year run until now. Okay, that's a very complicated job that Dawkins has done a very good job, and that's why he's ranked very high. There's also Coach Abe and the job she did when she was here. You Kyle, you know that very well.
Iconic,
to me, she's in that ranking.
And I would even argue, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong on this, like the women's basketball circuit itself is a challenging thing. Getting a coach, that program breaking out in any particular piece has been something that's been a struggle. Coach Katie Abrahamson Henderson, Coach Abe did an amazing thing here, and we're well aware of how she left in a very acceptable fashion. We know exactly why it would happen. Money talks. The SEC is a thing. I get it. She even, I think there's a rumor that she took one of the locker room showers with her. That's how much.
Yeah.
I'm joking. She did take the SID person. So like a lot of people went with her, and the program has had to rebuild anew. While, oh, by the way, ending up in the best basketball conference, arguably in the nation. There's that, which
Sure.
also probably works to Dawkins' credit as well on the men's side. So there's so many things beyond the record, I think, is the point.
That's what's so fascinating. And then, you got Scott Calabrese and the job he's done with the men's soccer program in that rankings. Emily Marin, maybe as consistent as it gets, 10 NCAA tournament appearances with the women's golf program. That is the second most by any UCF head coach behind one Amanda Cromwell. So that's a pretty good list. The Dagenais, I'll bring up the Dagenais. Again, you could make a case for him in the top 20, but what separated him and why we decided to put him at 21 versus, for example, some of the coaches ahead of him is the coaches ahead of him, like a Brian Kanyeko at tennis. You got coaches like Coach Sahedek. They've all led their programs to the Sweet 16. That's something that Todd never did at volleyball. They always fell short with some questionable losses that cut them their postseason run short, quite frankly, losing at home to Florida Gulf Coast. And they're now the new UCF head coach who beat that UCF team in the first round of the 2018 regionals at the venue. So that's probably why he's outside the top 20 to answer some of those questions that people have brought up since these rankings have come out.
And who knows, if you react loud enough, maybe Bryson Turner will comment and bring you reactions on another edition of the Night Shift podcast. So please feel free to respond or continue to respond with that in mind. But guys, I wanted to go to this. I know the reason why I'm lucky to do what I do with you guys here on the banner, at the Banneret, on the Night Shift pod and YouTube channel, is because your grasp of UCF history and a lot of different sports is well beyond, my reach, even though Lopez would have you believe I'm the Sultan of Spike. That is not the case. But with that knowledge of the various sports, I'm curious who showed out the most. What program surprised you with how much of a contribution they had to the top 50 list, Eric? Like, in your mind, you're like, wow, there's an awful lot of this sport on this list.
No, yeah. That's easy. I would say probably the men's and women's golf program, especially the men's side, some of the history. That was a lot, to the point where I remember I told Bryson, we don't have room for all of these. You got to make a decision here. You got to make a decision on some of these, and on the back end. I would say that's a surprise. I think people might be surprised at the history that those sports have. They don't get a lot of attention, so I get all that. But yeah, I would say the fact that as you like to call them, Kyle, the club. What is it? The club sports?
Country club. Country club.
The Olympic sports is what I say, but country club sports is
you said country club before, and Bryson's followed back you up on that one. A lot of successful coaches have come through UCF in those sports.
Yeah, I mean, Bryson, which, by the way, I think I just heard you say, Eric, that your apology letter goes to the golf candidates in the same way that Bryson had said track earlier. And shouts to Bryson Turner for citing an era that has me half his age currently when they happened. So there you go. The old guy's half your age, and you're still looking hard. That's you know what? A bell for Bryson Turner for his efforts here. But for you, who jumped off the list as to like, wow, they got a lot on here, or they represented in a particular way that you were able to shed light out on for Knight Nation out there, Bryson?
I think Eric kind of stole the point with the tennis and the golf coaches. There was some
country club sports is your house. That's fair.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. There was some very consistent success on that one. But I think for me, the biggest thing I got was, like you said, going back and seeing some of these old coaches that were kind of amazing at some of the stuff they got up to back then, and no one talks about them. Gail Falkenberg, who ranks number 35. I mentioned no interims, but she actually did serve as an interim head coach for women's basketball, even though she coached the tennis programs, which means she coached 3 teams at the same time, which is something I have never heard of a college coach doing, not to mention what she did to increase the status of tennis back then. And then also at the very tail end of the list, we talk about women's basketball and the struggles historically that it has had. But when you look at the early 90s, their very first NCAA tournament appearance in Division I was thanks to one Jerry Richardson. Mm-hmm. And only a few months afterwards, he ended up tragically passing away in a car accident. And I think of that and read the list to kind of just see the type of person that Jerry Richardson was, because the background I found on him was absolutely amazing. But it's one of those, we dedicated that number 50 spot to a pair of UCF head coaches that had their tenures ended too soon, because they had something good going when they were here, and things just got cut off by circumstances outside of their control. And part of me, especially in Jerry Richardson's case, part of me wonders what could have happened had he been able to build off of that NCAA tournament appearance. And so this was a chance to just talk about that time and the impact that he had. We just couldn't rank him any higher because he just didn't coach here for that long and only have one NCAA tournament appearance, a crucial NCAA tournament appearance though. But we can't exactly take him off the list because he died. So number 50 was the right place to do that. And credit to Lynn Bria as well, who was the person that was in the unenviable position to replace him. And she took him back to the tournament a few years later. We have her one spot above him. So other than those two, the only other women's basketball coaches that are on this list are Coach Abe, which we've talked about, and then Joe Sanchez, who coached in the Division II era. If a women's basketball program is on this list, that means they did something pretty doggone good.
No, listen, that's a great point.
We mentioned apology letters earlier. Apparently, tribute out there as well in the midst of this. So that's something you guys both managed to do here. And I'll say this with all this in mind, gentlemen, we're coming towards the end of this particular piece. I'll give you each one last point to kind of sign off, to let people know what it is they need to know about your point of view on these top 50 coaches. Eric, I'll start with you.
Well, hopefully, I know we've gotten feedback too on the Richardson part. People were intrigued by that. They didn't know about it. So I hope people learned stuff from it instead of getting, I think my football coach should be right here. Woo. No, that's not what this is about, guys. Sorry. There's other great people that have contributed to it. And it's a tough process. And I know Lynn Bria reached out and thanked us for being ranked. I think she had major contributions to the women's basketball. I think this also shows you too, there is not a lot of women's basketball coaches. It tells you kind of a hard job, guys. Kind of a hard job to be successful at this. Not a lot of men's basketball coaches either from that standpoint on. And I think those are some of the things to watch. And we try to explain in the article in some ways why they're ranked where they're at. Like you mentioned earlier, the question, what was hard? For me, one of the things that was tough, leaving Jay Bergman out of the top 10. Ranked 11th. I mean, this is UCF baseball, icon, legend, easily top 10 material, except the way things ended, which we get into in the article, takes away, to some extent why he's not in the top 10. I think if his career doesn't end the way it did in 2008, he's probably as high as number 6 in this rankings. And he's not in the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame as a result of how things ended. That's a whole different topic, but so things like that is hard to figure out. How did things end, and then balancing all that stuff. And look, I mean, obviously, as you'll see when the top 10 comes out, football is going to dominate that top 10. But I don't know that we have necessarily a clear cut, hey, this is the best football coach of all time. I know some have their preferences. But I think that in a lot of ways will be part of the storyline, will be connected to the storyline of the 2025 and beyond UCF football season with the start of the Scott Frost second era. I mean, that to me will be fit, because this is the thing for people that how do you change rankings of coaches? Well, Scott Frost ranking will drastically be impacted how he does here the second time, for example, because if he does great, if he can duplicate what he did in 2017, he's going sky high.
Oh, yeah.
But if he struggles like he did at the last place that he doesn't like to talk about, if he has similar results like that, his ranking's going to plummet. So this thing evolves as your time goes on, and it's fluid. And, we do take this very seriously. We consider this kind of like the Bible, if you will, the reference, where a lot of people use. We've gotten a lot of compliments, in fact, when we gotten compliment, like, especially with our player rankings. Our player rankings is we didn't do it this year. We're going to do it probably next year. That's a list that definitely is very influential in for a lot of different things around UCF, or what we've been told. So we take it very seriously. This is not like a gotcha or this or that. We try to do the best as can. I understand not everybody's going to agree with it, rankings and all that, but I hope people appreciate the people that have contributed to UCF as a whole of all these sports.
And to your point, if they read the pieces there on the blackandgoldbanneret.com, they'll at least know your thought process, whether they agree with you or not. Bryson, what do you got?
Yeah, exactly. One other topic on that front, I would say that was hard to do is how do we take into the accomplishments of Lloyd Bruce Burgess in the tennis program, because he's been around for 2 years. His players were mostly recruited by his predecessor, John Roddick, yet he took them farther in the postseason than Roddick ever did. And so that was one of those questions that we kind of had to reckon with. And ultimately, in the end, we actually decided to have them share a spot at number 19 because you have a couple spots in there that do feature two coaches. That's one of them. I don't want to spoil the other one, but that'll certainly be something that they'll want those out there that notice it will want to see the explanation in the article. Black and Gold Banneret.
Well, Matt, what's interesting there is we actually, like you mentioned, Frosty. Bryson just mentioned Burgess. Maura Allen is ranked 26. We have 3 coaches currently active that have coached 2 seasons at UCF, but are in the top 30. Because of the impact they've had. Like Maura Allen will always be remembered as the first UCF head coach to win a Big 12 outright championship with rowing. That's why she's ranked that high at 26, for example. Now, if she keeps going at the path that she goes with rowing, she could move up. If she doesn't, she'll drop off. Same thing with Burgess. He tied him with John Roddick, who helped build the tennis program. And again, that's an example. Like some people might say, well, why is Roddick and Burgess ahead of a Todd Dagenet or a Tiffany Roberts-Hadak, who both of them have longer tenure? Well, in Roddick's case, he took a tennis program that was, irrelevant would be a kind word. I don't know. What's a worse word, Kyle, than irrelevant? Whatever that.
In the coaching space, not a lot, buddy.
Whatever that word, to geography, this is where the Brian Murphy thesaurus would come in and play here. He would come up with a fancy word. But shout out Murph. That's my shout out of the week. My point is the tennis program was nothing at UCF at the point that John Roddick came and was hired by Danny White. For all the one of the many things Danny White did, the one thing he doesn't get enough credit, which is kind of weird, is when he turned around the tennis program, hiring John Roddick to be the director of tennis and turning this tennis program. John Roddick hired Brian Kanyeko, and now you've got 2 tennis programs that are literally top 25 every year now, it seems like. That's the immediate impact that they've had versus coaches like Roberts-Hadak and Dagenet, who have done great jobs in their respective sports, but there've already been success and tradition prior to their arrival. So that's why. And again, both Kanyeko, who's done it twice, as well as Burgess, they've all gone to the Sweet 16 round, whereas Dagenet didn't. And plus, if you look at Dagenet's resume, if you take away McKenna Melville, there's a lot of missed NCAA tournaments there. But again, this is all nitpick stuff, but that's an example of the rankings. This is
the level of detail you went to. Don't just dismiss that, Eric. Yeah. Like you guys busted tail, and
you have to nitpick it. You have to nitpick stuff in situations like this. Yeah. And again, it's not and one thing me and Bryson try to do also is, like, if you're in the top 20, do we feel you're a Hall of Fame resume? Like, would we if we put you there, do we think you would be in get voted into the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame? And I think except for Burgess, because that's a unique circumstances, you can make a case that all the other coaches in the top 20 are warranted of being in the Hall of Fame or already are in the Hall of Fame. I mentioned Jay Bergman.
Are in the conversation, so to speak.
Right, like Jay Bergman, the only reason he's not in the Hall of Fame is because how his career ended. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, like, I would argue, for example, like Emily Marin, if Emily Aaron resigned tomorrow as UCF women's golf, she should be in the Hall of Fame with the job that she's done at golf. And all these other coaches. So that's the other part of this when we think of rankings is, hey, would you vote for this person over this person for the Hall of Fame type of thing? So there's a combination of the things that go into the rankings.
Yep, there's the different sports, there's the different time periods as well, because we talk one term that Eric and I use between each other is the founder's advantage. Because
the foundation defense. Yeah, I know exactly. Yeah. It's what I call it on other pods. I'm right with it. They're with you. Go ahead, Bryson. But for those that don't know, tell them.
There is a region of the list from about from 30 to 33 that consists of coaches that were there at the founding, or at least very close to the founding of their respective programs. In fact, three of them are in the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame at the minute. And the reason why there are UCF Athletics Hall of Famers outside the top 20. The only difference is more about the time period that they are in. They're as high as they are because of how inextricably linked they are to the formation of the program as it stands in the first place. Like, we wouldn't be here today if they had not done what they had done for their respective programs. I mean,
I think the obvious example is Torchy Clark, right?
Torchy Clark is not. First of all, Torchy Clark is definitely not in that region I was talking about. For the record, this is no. This is Jerry Gergley, Don Jonas, and Dennis Camrat that I was talking about. All UCF Athletics Hall of Famers. But Gergley, for example, was the head coach of men's golf for only like a year, but he also was wrestling head coach for a long time and did really well in that. Don Jonas, first head coach of the football team, absolutely well done job. Fundraising and all of that. But again, this was a D3 level program, so the competition wasn't really that high. And then Dennis Camrat was a rowing for like ever. So he really had to set that foundation. This is why
I leave the history to you boys, because I take a look at somebody who was foundational in their own right, and you weren't even taken there. And God bless it. This is what makes this list great, Bryson.
But you mentioned Torchy Clark, and I'll say this, because I won't spoil the top 10. I won't spoil where we ranked people, but let's just say that when Eric talks about the nitpicky stuff, it is that, and also the recent accomplishments that certain coaches in the top 10 have done that have made the difference of where they ended up being ranked where they are.
Correct. Well, we'll give you an example. I'll give you a name as an example. It's Gene McDowell, football coach. Since the last time we did these rankings, 2023, the summer of 23, what happened? Well, Gene McDowell got inducted into the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame. He had not been into the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame for a long time because of a, quote, felony charge against him back from the cell phone scandal, which led to his ouster and Mike Kruzek taking over. See, we go full circle in this pod. Back to the real. But so for a long time, he was not in the Hall of Fame because they didn't, because of the cell phone scandal and the felony charge. Well, they now decided to change that after when he got inducted in the year 2023. So what you'll see when the top 10 comes out, he makes a significant jump in the rankings this year compared to where he was 2 years ago, because now he's a Hall of Famer. And look, if UCF's going to be, hey, we're good with the whole cell phone scandal stuff and all that, which I'm fine with, then that's going to have an impact on the ranking. Because that's cool with it.
How much does NIL affect some of this stuff? Good God, it's coming up everywhere, gentlemen.
Oh, don't remind me. That's going to make rankings really brutal down the road there in the decade there. But listen, I'm sure we'll break down the top 10 in a future podcast. I will warn people this, because I know when the top 10 comes out, there's going to be some that are going to say, "Oh, Eric's biased here. Clearly, he's influenced." And I just want to state. All right, I'm not going to say what it's about, but if you follow me, you already know where this is going.
I say this will not be a tough topic for those who know you to bear. I get it.
You're gonna have a reaction like, of course he ranked them there and all that. And I'm just gonna say, and this is I swear I got my hand up right now and pray and say, I swear to this, Bryson had a bigger influence on where certain coaches got ranked that you might think I did. And we'll leave it as that. Just remember that when you look at the top 10.
I will
blame me. This. Yeah. Thanks, Eric.
I will say this.
I will say I didn't, at the end of the day, I didn't really argue too much. I did kind of say, all right, but he made some good cases.
Who would you be to argue with facts, right? No. And I will say this, Eric, having looked over the list some myself, and me having dubbed you the Sultan of stickball, you and I going to epic war at one point when it came to my first edition of the Bannies, where we first went to war in two different sports that we each cover closely. I don't think I don't think you put this person too high either. If everybody's picked up what you're laying down, so I'll leave all the above at that. So yeah, with all that in mind, that's our walkthrough, sort of our explainer, if you will, of the top 50 coaches here, as placed by Eric Lopez and Bryson Turner here in the 2025 edition. And like I said, I expect some movement upcoming with at least two of the coaches in years to come. But this is a fascinating topic, and it's a fascinating read, and hopefully a fascinating listen and watch here, both on the Black and Gold Banneret and Night Shift Productions here as well. So with all that in mind, Eric Lopez, tell the world where you could be found.
Eric Lopez, ELO, that's where I'll be. We'll be covering Football Media Day. Can't wait. Football is here. It's going to be exciting. Make sure, by the way, you saw, if you went to blackandgoldbanneret.com on Thursday, you saw the big news, the site to be different looking real soon in the next week or so. But more importantly, we're going to have a lot of football coverage in the Scott Frost era, part 2. We'll have the wall-to-wall coverage here on Night Shift and on the Black and Gold Banneret throughout the year. So make sure you follow that and follow me at Eric Lopez ELO.
And of course, the formidable Bryson Turner, not only of the Black and Gold Banneret, but of Knights on SI as well. Tell the world where you can be found.
You can find me at It's Bryson Turner on X, and I will also give a shout out to the Banny Awards, which are all out now on the Black and Gold Banner on the blackandgoldbanneret.com. Yes, absolutely. So the fan votes for every single award will remain open until Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. So you have a few more days left to get your fan votes in to make your voice heard for who you all think should win the Banny Awards for this last athletic year that has passed. Once that is done, the rest of of course, during this time, the rest of us as a panel at the Black and Gold Banneret are going to vote as well. And then whoever gets the most votes, the fan vote being the winner, the fan vote getting a vote as well, will be crowned the award winner for the year. And we will and that will be a topic we cover in a future episode of the Night Shift podcast. So be sure to stay tuned for that.
A lot going on, even though none of the sports have technically started yet. That's the beauty here of what we do. But of course, I'm Kyle Nash, the student of the game. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at the SOTG. Of course, on Facebook as a student of the game. And of course, check out the Black and Gold Banneret on all the socials. UCF_Banneret on Twitter. I don't call it XIF Kids. It gives people the wrong idea. And of course, on Threads as Black and Gold Banneret. Also Instagram as well. And Blue Sky. We have a Banneret presence there as well. So check out all of that. Eric Lopez mentioned that I and Donnie Docs Don Struble will also be in attendance on Sunday for Coaches Media Day. And of course, we will get you everything we can throughout this. I mean, the summer is dying. Winter is coming, right? And yeah, so with all that, for Eric Lopez, Bryson Turner, this is Kyle Nash. And until next time, everyone, class dismissed. Go Knights! Charge on.